Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Crow from 2024. The surprising thing about this movie is it's not as bad as I thought it probably would be, but isn't. Although this isn't good and sort of a total mess and doesn't work, it did try something, and I kind of commend it for that, even if it didn't stick with it the entire movie. The Crow is very over budgeted, not very well cast, stylized in a way that doesn't really work. It is a complete and utter mess. I think with this one, it sort of tries to do something different and doesn't understand the genre reasons the original Crow was, and tries to play off that without really understanding why it would do something like that. Specifically, you know the story of the Crow. It's like Eric Draven and Shelley, they meet and then they're murdered, and then he comes back and all this stuff. And in the first one, it's basically like they're murdered pretty early on, and he becomes the Crow, and he's like the Crow the whole movie, and you see him kill people. And in this one, I think half the movie or something, or 40 minutes, is him and Shelley, and you get to meet them in a drug rehab, and you slowly get to it, and then you find out she's murdered because of some weird mystical thing, a video of something on her phone, and then they kill them. And then for a while, Eric Draven, he's not really good at fighting or killing people. He doesn't have those skills, so he's it's very awkward. He's isn't really a Crow type guy trying to be the Crow, which is kind of an actually interesting way to take this franchise. I actually thought it was a little surprised. It's how suddenly you're really good at killing people and kicking ass and stuff. That doesn't make a ton of sense, and that's when the movie was actually sort of interesting. I was a little surprised. Eventually, he does his cool John Wick action sequence, because, not joking, a bunch of crows in a weird subway afterlife, which looks like an above ground train sort of around me, but not anyway. But yeah, he just, the John Wick sequence part that you've seen in the trailers, the rest of the movie isn't as John Wickian. It sort of comes out of nowhere. They're like, look, fuck it, we know you want him to see him kick ass and stuff, so forget that whole he doesn't want to be a superhero thing. He does, and we'll just show you. And that sequence is really cool. It makes zero sense. It sort of comes out of nowhere. And I noticed that happen a few times. He was talking to one person's mother, and she just starts crying out of nowhere. There are certain parts when it would happen, and I was like, did I miss something? And then it suddenly cut to this, or am I blacked out from it? It was really weird, and it happened a few times. But what I think interesting about this Crow is, the original Crow is in a post-revenge movie world. Death Wish was on Death Wish 4 or something. Everyone sort of knew that genre at that point, or audiences were expecting that genre. It's sort of how genres evolve. And at that time, it was more immediate to just they're killed, the incident happens, and now the rest of the movie's revenge. And in this, Rupert Sanders and the writers decide, well, let's build on this relationship, and then we get to the revenge part, which you're essentially talking about the original Death Wish. The original revenge movies is the action genre started. So you're looping back, but it almost felt like they didn't understand the genre that got to the point when the original Crow came out. It's they sort of overthought it and didn't realize they went back. And so if they had known that and know why they're doing it, and there's some sort of comment or something, I would give Rupert Sanders and the creators more credit. I don't think that's what went on. I think they went, oh, we can't just have John Wick's puppy die that early. We have to have him and his puppy get ice cream and do all these things. I'm not comparing him and his girlfriend to that element, but it's they're not thinking about why people like that structure and the immediacy of it. And instead, because this isn't a well-written, well-made movie, the relationship feels weird. It's very suddenly, you sort of don't, I think it thinks it's really getting me compelled into this relationship, which I never really felt that way about. And just structurally, it's a total mess, because it didn't understand why it was doing the genre things it did. It felt like it was trying to do it to well, what if we expand the relationship, like really get it to matter and stuff? And it's like, well, I guess. Bill Skarsgård, who was formerly Pennywise, is fine when he's doing kind of all of it. He's a fairly good actor, but feels very typical. Same with like Danny Houston as the bad guy. We've seen that a bunch of places, and I usually don't even like him that much as a bad guy. I never really find him that compelling. It just feels kind of boring. I don't know, like FK Twigs. I never heard of this woman before, and like everyone was like asked me how she was. I was like, I didn't know she was such a thing, but I did think she was actually rather good. I did like her performance. She's very compelling. She's probably the most interesting part of the movie. Probably helps that, as Eric or Bill Skarsgård is falling in love with her, we want to see her on screen, or at least I did. She has a unique look, and she kind of fall in love with her as well. So I actually think she could be better in better movies, not just this thing. Rupert Sanders, who directed this, has directed 3 films: Snow White and the Huntsman, Ghost in the Shell, and this. I've seen and reviewed all of them. My main thing with his filmography is I think he's a very stylized guy, but I think he reminds me of, I think I said this somewhere, but shitty Gareth Edwards, where Gareth Edwards understands he's not necessarily a storyteller, he's a stylist, but gets that to work for him in The Creator or Rogue One or Godzilla or whatever. And in this, it's with Rupert Sanders, I always feel like he's not as concerned with the storytelling as he is with the style, which doesn't really work. Like, I don't know, it's almost like he gets that he is telling the story, but like the way the original Crow was and stuff, he doesn't understand why or how they told the story that way and what the reasoning is. And he's just like, this is the best way to present the story, but I just don't see him thinking about these things as much as an interesting genre director is. He's just a stylist. I wish he'd hook up with a good writer and a good producer that could angle him in the right way, but the way these are just feels like, oh, this is what a studio director is now. He directed a fantasy reinterpretation, our anime remake, and then a Crow reboot, and it just really it's depressing. And I wish his movies were better. I guess Snow White and the Huntsman's the only one I sort of liked, but I wouldn't say liked all that much. I wish he had become, I don't know, I wish he was a little more interesting than what he's sort of become, and I wish this movie was, because I think he could do something interesting with the Crow, and they had some interesting ideas, particularly a crow that didn't want to answer the call. Basically, is kind of a cool idea. Like, why should they be these killer things? But like when these things suddenly happen, and the whole impetus of like having a spirit, a mystical bad guy, like you not only have the crow, but you have another person coming after the crow, which I don't think it ever really, it sort of worked, but like they didn't tell it in a great way. So most of the time when they reveal stuff about him, it was like, wait, why would that, I don't understand why that would be. It just very like strange kind of way to present the story. It's like they sort of definitely overthought it in the stupidest way possible. That's like sort of what we got with it. As someone who watched the original and likes the original to a certain degree, I mean, this just makes me think all the worst things about modern Hollywood. It doesn't make me think, oh yeah, this needed an update. They didn't know what they were doing. It felt like they very much knew what they were doing, and film moving past that, if this is what the result is, has been a complete mistake, because it didn't understand why that film was so interesting and so watchable at the time. I think with this one, it just feels like your average 2024 horror thriller type thing. It doesn't feel very distinct or interesting, and I think like most follow-ups of The Crow, it's just disappointing. It's just very disappointing. I think it's more frustrating than something like Madam Web, because you can sort of see the glimmer of hope. You can see the idea, and they don't do it because they have to do certain things, and the Crow movie has to have things. I do like how it's so naked about like, yeah, we got to do this like John Wick thing. So like, sorry guys, movie's gonna be not the movie anymore. Like I do like it's like, oh okay, this is like adaptation if it was dumb or something, but it's that I found a little funny, but it is like frustrating. And I do think, and the casting wasn't as compelling. I wish you had better henchmen. I wish it all came together better, but it didn't. And what we have is sort of like an ambitious Crow movie that never gets to fully be resurrected and become itself. It sort of has to fight with being the modern Hollywood thing, while also not being compelling it being its own thing, or the modern Hollywood thing. You're just kind of sitting there and watching something, apathetically be a movie because of recognizable IP. I don't think it was able to make anyone that re-excited for it. It's kind of disappointing to see The Crow finally have a movie out again, and it to be something like this. I hope they can do more with The Crow, and if this is sort of it, it's sort of a sad way to go. I hope it gets resurrected as something else possibly in the future, but right now, watching this Crow, you kind of just want everyone to walk away and wash their hands of this thing. Just remember the first one and wonder why we've made so many attempting to do the same thing and constantly keep failing. Maybe this failed a little less than worser ones, but it's not like I would ever go and dig this one up ever again. I have seen the Crow remake. Now, please leave me alone. Stop developing these things, and come back to me when you have anything interesting to say. Or you're going to have the same thing the Crow has always said. I don't see much of a reason to watch any of these that aren't the original in the first place. Alright, so if you've seen The Crow and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.